Curious.
Yeah. So I've had conversations mostly with Steve, and him and Ron and Frank are going to get together to put together a board education for us on that entire process. So because of other things we have going on tonight, it's not going to happen tonight.
Wicked busy time.
Yeah, but it's in their queue for them to get together to do that, and they will present to us as soon as time allows in our regular meetings.
Thank you very much.
So it's in the pipeline for the future, relatively near future.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else on the minutes from November 7th? All in favor of approving the minutes as presented?
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? Seeing none. Is there any other communications to come for the board tonight? See any? All right. All right, so we will finish the clerk's report. We don't have any other visitors. So let's move on to consent agenda. Is there a motion to go into consent agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Bob,
Second.
seconded by Ruth. And let's start with finance, building, and transportation.
Okay, Finance Committee met on November 10th, and we approved warrant numbers 1067, 1068, 1069, 1071, 1072, 1073, 1074, and 1076. The amount of $2,799,836.09. We also approved payrolls in the amount of payrolls of October 14th, the amount of $422,214.95, and payroll of October 28th in the amount of $433,358.55. Then we met again on November 28th, and we approved warrant numbers 1077, 1078, 1080, and 1081, and 1082, amount of $390,852.07. And payrolls of November 10th, the amount of, those look like they're the same. No, they're not.
Yeah, some of them are different that you've said already.
No, November 10th is $441,386.94. The payroll of November 23rd is $533,176.45. And we also discussed various parts of the budget.
There were two, well, I see on the first, November 7th, it's on the agenda as 1 million, but I see it should be 2. But then November 21st is different on the agenda.
And both batches of warrants, the total that you had was different than the total that's on our agenda.
Oh,
Well, not the second one, the 21st was correct, wasn't it?
No, it's not
No.
by
Oh, it
a
was?
little bit.
It was only off by a little bit, relatively speaking, but it was off.
And
Those would be the
you said
numbers that we
the
oughta-
7th?
Okay.
these are the numbers we approved.
Okay, so why
Said 1 million.
don't you give us those numbers
Oh, it
again
should
from
just be
the two batches of warrants,
1 million.
the total.
And I'll check.
The
with
totals for the warrants only.
Yeah.
The warrants, they're dated November 21st, that we approved on November 28th. The total was $390,852.07. The ones that are dated November 7th, that that we approved on November 10th, the total was $2,779,836.09.
So the two got dropped from up.
So the two
Came on one on our agenda, that's all.
Yeah.
All right,
The other one.
thank you for repeating those, Ruth. And Jane, you got the new ones?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else for building, finance, and transportation?
Well, we did have two other meetings, so we've been very active with the budget, which we're going to talk about tonight. We met on the 10th and spent some time also on the capital plan, and we'll be going through all this. And then we had another meeting on the 21st, so we've had actually 4 meetings since the last board meeting.
Excellent, thank you for your hard work on that. All right, so WSCSU finance.
Well, I
Well, I
Go ahead.
filled in for Russ for the last WSESG Finance Committee meetings. And so you won't get as complete a report as you got from him. The last one that we had, we discussed the administration and instruction portion of the budget. And one of the main things was that under Act 148, all special ed money now goes to the supervisory union instead of going to the schools. Maybe Mr. Rucker could fill us in a little more on some of the details of these two meetings.
Sure, yeah, so Finance Committee is preparing the supervisory union budget, just as we are here for the first draft this evening for BUHS, along with all of our other districts. So as part of that process, we are adjusting to the legislative requirements that as of fiscal year 18, so it'll be new to us in this budget cycle, districts have been accustomed to receiving special education revenues directly from the state, and as far as a budget process, that's what folks are accustomed to seeing. That's changing, as Ruth is describing, and it has a pretty significant implication on all of the district budgets. On a net basis, meaning net of revenue, expense net of revenue, not very significant impact, if any. But remember, towns, school boards vote on the amount to spend, not the amount to tax and not the amount of revenue. We vote on the amount to spend by statute. And so what's going to happen is this, and this is what we're discussing at the SU Finance, is the SU budget will increase significantly associated with employment of the paraeducators that are currently being employed at the district level. And so your district budgets, you're going to see substantial decline in special ed line items because there will be no special ed employment at the district levels. It's at the SU. The other thing that we'll see is a substantial drop in revenues at the district level. You'll get no state aid at the district level. That will go to the SU.
For special ed.
For special ed. So this is the main topic at our last meeting. It was discussing, well, what are those implications, and making sure that our finance committee is doing what Ruth is doing right now, either explaining that to the boards. That we're hoping that all of our finance committee members are sharing this implication with all of our boards, keep folks informed of what's around the corner. We're going to see that tonight also in our own budget draft, our first draft. But I say on a net effect is not significantly different.
but the meaning when we go to set the tax rate. Because the tax rate already incorporates revenues and expenses and the net effect of those. But as we prepare our budgets and we format them the way we have been accustomed to and the way we're required to in our annual reports, special education is going to show a very substantial decline in spending because the SU is going to send the net, the difference between revenues and expenses, the net amount for the districts to pay. And that will be much lower than what you voted on in all years past. The other thing that just really briefly that we talked about, but we didn't get to the substance of it, I just want you to know it's right around the corner as well, is that because the revenue is being essentially combined, centralized by the AOE, and they're not associating the revenue with any district in particular, it's part of the spirit of a collaborative K-12 unified system that the law required for special ed in 2015. We need to revisit the assessment methodology that the Finance Committee and the Supervisory Union has been working under. It would no longer work with this change in revenue. So we're going to discuss that on December 8th. That's our next meeting. Oh, I'm sorry, yes,
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is. I think our BUHS Finance Committee's meeting at 8 a.m. and our SU Finance Committee's meeting that afternoon at 5.
So let me just say that that there were, I think, 3 SU Finance meetings since our last one, because we just had the one November meeting here. November 9th I went to, and we did payrolls and warrants, and we probably did that on the 16th and the 30th were the other meetings. There's another meeting this Thursday, 5 p.m. at Oak Grove to go over a preliminary total budget for the SU and the special ed budget allocation that Frank was just talking about. And then the following Thursday, the 15th, there'll be another SU Finance meeting, I believe at 5, and the full SU board will meet at 6. And one other question I wanted to ask, which came out of the last or 2 SU meetings before, I wanted to ask, an issue came up. The SU sort of acts the same way that the BUHS board does in terms of the Finance Committee goes through the warrants every time and signs, and then they're ratified by the SU board, just the way the Finance Committee here does that, and we just ratify it every time. There was a question brought up by some of the town boards that they wanted to see all the warrants. So I will just ask you, if you want to see, because those are public records, if you want to see those warrants, we could email those things out to everybody, as opposed to right now they're emailed out to the 6 SU Finance members. But if you are interested in seeing the warrants, we can email them to you. So let me know if everybody wants to see more warrants, if nobody wants to see more warrants. I mean, that's the way we've done it. I mean, I've never asked to see the BUHS warrants. That's what the committee is for. But if you want, we can certainly do that. But I just wanted to ask if there was any interest. I'm not hearing it yet, but if there is interest, I mean, it's fine. We can circulate those if you want them, but they are available. Okay.
Thank you. Anything else for WSCSU Finance? All right. Planning and Policy.
That's not Matt.
Teacher Curriculum Committee.
We met this evening to hear a presentation on one of our 1%. This was on the use of wearable technology in fitness for our fitness PE class. They're using the Garmin, doing all kinds of cool stuff with it, monitoring activity, and seems to be going quite well. We also reviewed a couple of 1% and approved some extra spending for extra work done.
BAMS Committee.
The BAMS Committee had not met.
WRCC Committee.
Has not met, I don't think, since the last meeting. But we have to, we will be meeting soon to review the response to the audit that Michael has prepared for the review that we had.
Right, WSCSU Act 46 Study Committee.
We had a very interesting meeting last Thursday.
And Ian, while we're talking, I'll just pass around what Ron is developed. I believe it's a
Is that the changes?
edited version of what you're going to speak about. So let's come around.
I have mentioned several times to this group that there's been a continued debate over the proportional model versus the hybrid at-large model as far as how the board should be made up. We have been told for some time that we can only pick one or the other, that either the towns get their own representative or all representatives must be voted on at large.
That's stupid too.
Apparently, a new interpretation of the law came up suddenly, and we are now able to do the thing that we have been told for 4 months that we were not allowed to do legally, which is to have at-large members and have the individual towns elect their own representative. So it's a wonderful compromise step. It's what we, as a committee, had been asking for probably about 4 months. And we suddenly were able to do that, which solved that problem. The makeup of the board will now be 4 members from Brattleboro, who must be residents of Brattleboro and are elected by the people of Brattleboro. 1 member each from the towns of Putney, Dummerston, and Guilford, who must be residents of their respective town and elected by just that town, and 2 at-large members who will be voted on by the entire electorate of the district.
And because I'll be honest, I missed last Thursday's meeting, Act 46 committee meeting, so I was not there. And I'm really glad about this because it has been something we've talked about and tried to figure a way to kind of make as many people happy as possible with this. But whose interpretation is this now? So that I'm just curious that in a month, are we going to get somebody else's interpretation that's going to tell us, oh no, you can't do that, now you have to do a completely different
The interpretation that this is now acceptable came from Chris Leopold, our legal counsel, who is the same person that gave us the previous interpretation that this was not possible. So
well, here's a little bit more background on that. So it's actually, he's not being inconsistent. It is not a reinterpretation of the law. What it is the way in which the at-large voting had developed was more of an all or nothing scenario based on this one vote, one person constitutional precedent, which says you're supposed to have a representative vote based on your population in your town. So the problem, the proportional was what it was, very straightforward, but there was this concern about Brattleboro having a very large majority of the new unified board. So the discussion was, well, let's look at the at-large format, which is basically you have to have at least 1 resident from each town, but essentially everyone votes on everyone. The whole union, it's as if the state is saying the purpose of a union is that you consider yourself one entity, not a fractured entity. So that's the rationale behind all folks in a region voting on all eligible candidates. The issue was when we tried to do more than two at-large candidates and retain a proportional format. And the fundamental issue is, even in this, that's what I mean by it being consistent with the original interpretation of the law, the fundamental issue is, in a circumstance where you have these two scenarios, a proportional vote and an at-large vote, is there a scenario where any one town has a substantial variation from their proportional representation? And the two at-large member is the one where it doesn't trigger what happened at Mount Anthony 35 years ago, where there was a very significant misrepresentation around voting versus population. So that's a little more of the background. It's not a new. I think what you're correct in is that other districts have pressed the envelope around, well, how do we refine, how do we get from proportional to at-large, as opposed, instead of just one or the other, how do we refine that where we might have steps toward it? They kind of created a path for us to reevaluate, and that's where we're at. It comes down to, we're 18,600 people in our region, among excluding Vernon. Brattleboro's 12,000 out of that 18. So Brattleboro needs to have 64% plus or minus voting presence on the board. If it's a 9-member board, 6 would be exactly proportional. And under this scenario, they, by agreeing to a 4 minimum resident requirement for the Brattleboro town in the regional election, you're still being reasonably represented on a proportional level, assuming you don't get the at-large. So that's the task, that's the analysis, that's where this whole thing came. Thank you.
The other change, which is really not a change, it's going back to what we were originally told. There was a list of articles that we wanted to be essentially untouchable. And on that list, the one that most questioned was the article about the leadership councils for the schools. And there were some inconsistencies in what we were being told, because we were told that those things in the warning article were protected, and yet that one was on the list. So many of us were questioning whether that one really was protected, and it was confirmed that it was not protected. Therefore, we added a clause into the article requiring that if a future board wants to alter or remove that article, it will require a unanimous vote.
By whom?
By that board.
Not by the population.
It doesn't go to the people, it's a unanimous vote by the board.
It's about halfway through page 10 in italics is that change.
We feel making it a unanimous vote makes it pretty safe.
It should go to the people.
Yeah, the issue there is that the statutes prescribe the warning for a merger, a unified system. It actually has a sample warning, and the sample warning it has 2 articles, and it's essentially written in the statute as to what is presented to the voters.
And to make it go to the voter, we would have to put it into the warning article, which we would have been advised that we can't do or shouldn't do.
That's where, if you look up the statute, it's Title 16, it's, I believe it's 706F is the actual article. If you look at that, there's no provision that says, and edit any way you want, or, this is what is required to be warned and voted. So that's where the direction is coming from.
So although a vote of the electorate would be more secure, we felt that unanimous vote was as secure as we could make it.
Any questions?
Mike, Frank, are you saying that under a certain scenario, Mr. Leopold still thinks it's proper for other towns to vote on, like, for instance, Dummerston's representative? People from outside Dummerston, under a certain scenario, the state still believes that's a proper way of selecting a school board member?
That's provided in law under at-large voting format, and there are several supervisory unions or actually regional systems that do it. So it's nothing new for Vermont.
But it's certainly, I mean, I've complained about the fact that how can people in Dummerston, Putney, Guilford, and Brattleboro select a candidate from Vernon when they don't know anybody? I mean, it made no sense. And I'm glad they changed their mind, even though you say it's consistent. I don't find it consistent. But. So can we count on that, do you think?
Unless it changes again.
Yeah. That's a good thing.
Any other questions about Act 46?
And finally, the Act 46 committee is coordinating a series of forums on the Vernon issue this week. We would like to be able to get members of this board to those meetings, since the BUHS board is a signatory to that agreement. I will be attending the Tuesday meeting in Dummerston and the Thursday meeting at Oak Grove School. Ricky, were you going to the Wednesday meeting?
I was confused by the email I got from Jill.
Because she was
asked me
confused
to
about
be
what she was
Thursday,
doing.
and then
Yeah.
I said, where is Wednesdays?
Wednesdays is in Putney,
At
the Putney School,
what time?
6 o'clock.
Yeah, I should be able to do that.
It would be nice if we could also get representatives of the towns to the meetings.
Guilford's having theirs tonight, which is why I didn't go to that.
Yeah.
So, I would have been there, but I'm here instead.
Same here. So Ruth,
I will be going to the one in Dummerston.
And we
I
don't have a
could go.
Putney person. But. Did you want to go to the one in Putney on?
I prefer to go to either Oak Grove or Emerson.
Okay.
Emerson's Wednesday, right?
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
That was just tomorrow.
Tomorrow is
Tomorrow.
Tuesday.
Tomorrow, okay. Thank you, Ruth.
Putney is Wednesday,
Okay,
and Oak Grove is Thursday.
I'll do one of them. Let me see what falls on there.
I assume that everyone in the SU got a little card telling about these meetings and that vote, since I got one, and I didn't assume that I was singled out.
The mailing?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think they went everywhere. Great. All right.
So the vote is a week from tomorrow. No, December 13th.
Yes.
I hope we get a good turnout, but I'm not real hopeful.
We'll see. Anything else about Act 46?
That's all I have.
So that's it for consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve consent agenda?
So moved.
Okay, we'll give it to Mike, and Ruth can second it. How's that?
Yeah.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstentions? None. All right, let's do administrative reports. Let's start this end and work our way down. WRCC.
So a few items to report out on tonight. First start with our forestry students, Future Farmers of America students competed in October in Randolph for the annual soils competition. And this year, Seth Rhodes placed first overall in the state, and our team placed second overall in the state. So congratulations to these students and our new teacher, Errol Nelson, and new para, John Harrison, for doing a very nice job preparing these students for a nice competition. They're looking forward. They're going to be participating in the winter competition, which will be held in Montpelier very soon. So, Skills USA, also another CTSO, attended a Fall Youth Leadership Conference in Montpelier at the State House on November 10th. And these students receive a nice understanding of how the Vermont government works, and also they get to communicate with other students across the state and learn some great leadership skills during that day. So, great job by all of them. In October, there was also a career fair downtown Brattleboro, and our FBLA students attended this career fair, and we just received a letter from one of the area businesses that were represented at the career fair. I just want to highlight this student. It was a FBLA student. Her name is Melanie Dow. And quoted by the business in the letter was, Melanie presented herself with professionalism. She was well-dressed, well-spoken, and very engaged in conversation. So congratulations to Melanie for this recognition in the public and with our area businesses. It's great to be recognized with these attributes and skills. Again, with news from forestry, they are currently participating in an off-campus project, which they normally do at an average of 2 or 3 per year in our community. And they are learning a great deal of knowledge from Errol Nelson, their teacher, and para John Harrison, of the importance of rerouting water. The class is currently working on a subsurface drainage project at Rose Lily Farm in West Brat. The purpose of the project is to reclaim a pasture by removing some subsurface water. This will allow the farmer to use a parcel of land to graze his beef cows and add to his grazing rotation. And students have installed over 300 feet of pipe, and it is producing 2 gallons of water per minute. And at the same time, the students are using all the heavy equipment and machinery to produce a ditch as well. So the students really look forward to these off-campus projects and get the real-world experience as well. So nice job for those students and teachers. They also, the forestry program from now until Christmas, will be selling Christmas trees for $25, which is a steal. They're beautiful trees. If you're interested, if you don't have one up yet, see myself or Errol Nelson in the forestry department. Our early childhood education class hosts a co-op every spring and fall. And this year, for this semester, there are 23 students participating in this excellent off-campus, real-life co-op experience. Local elementary schools, Vernon Academy, Oak Grove, the Infant Toddler Early Learning Center, which is located here on campus, the Family Garden Early Learning Center, the Horizon Early Learning Center, Brattleboro Center for Children, and Early Education Services on Birch Street host our students. So I want to thank those organizations and elementary schools for giving our students hands-on applications that they really enjoy doing, and the schools and organizations really appreciate our students as they're learning and applying what they're learning within our classes. So our teacher, Linda Quay, does a wonderful job preparing these students for these co-op opportunities, and very proud of her continued dedication to WRCC. I'm not sure, I've lost count of how many years she has, and many years here. This past weekend, WRCC hosted an open house and holiday sale, bazaar, rummage sale, and we saw about 300 students between the hours of 9 and 2 come through our doors located we had at the Tech building. And our teachers were also on site doing demonstrations of their programs, and students as well came in on a Saturday, which was very impressive, to show the public the programs they really love and enjoy here at the Career Center. So kudos to the students and the teachers and the community members I want to thank for supporting us. Also, we had the 16 local crafters and vendors selling their wares, and I saw a line at most of their tables of people purchasing or asking a lot of questions, which was nice to see. Also want to put a nice shout out to Jana Crafts. She organized this event and took a lot of time and energy, and she did a wonderful job for us. So she's a very important asset to the WRCC when it comes to outreach and, for our programs. And the proceeds will go to our career and technical student organizations such as FBLA, Skills USA, and FFA for their spring competitions and travel funds. And that's all I have.
Thanks. All right, let's move down the table to BUHS.
Thank you. A lot going on at the high school. I guess I want to start around the world with Germany. Our German exchange students, we sent a group of 15 of our students to Germany from November 10th to the 22nd. They spent most of their time in Leipzig, where we have a pretty strong and long partnership with a school there. They spent a lot of time touring BMW. They did not bring anyone home. They went to the Buchenwald concentration camp, another significant place, and spent a lot of time on homestays. Karen Sebastian did a phenomenal job, and she partners well with Katrin Bohem, who is from the school in Leipzig. And they said this was a very smooth trip. They were very pleased with the way the children behaved, and the host families were very excited to have our students arrive and stay. And so we're looking forward to welcoming our students from Germany next year. And that's a partnership we've had, I want to say, for 15 or 20 years, and it's great to have our students go there and have their students come over. In the music department, I'd like to start with Steve Rice. Steve Rice was awarded the Arthur Williams Award for Meritorious Service to the Arts by the Vermont Arts Council at the Putney School at a dinner held there a few weeks ago. And you all know the job Steve Rice does. And it was great to see him get some statewide recognition for his passion for music, and more importantly, his passion for educating children about music. So congratulations to Steve. Along those same lines, junior Reese Glennon has been accepted to the All-Eastern Mixed Choir. He joins 400 other students from the Northeast, and they'll be performing in New Jersey in April. Oddly enough, he is the third Glennon to be selected for this honor. Both his older brothers got this honor when they were at BUHS. And if you've ever heard Reese sing, he has a phenomenal voice. It's great to listen to him. And along those same lines, on November 16th, BUHS Music Department held their first fall concert. And as usual, it's great. It's wonderful to go to those and listen to a level of musicianship that is unheard of in this area from high school students. And that's Steve and Patty and now Riley at the middle school. They just continue to produce great musicians and great shows. Along those lines, you can join Ricky on December 16th in the BHS auditorium The English department is hosting the Poetry Out Loud competition. That's the BUHS version of a state and national poetry competition. And we've had students go to the state finals several years in a row. Very exciting this year, in addition to having Nancy Olson, Ricky, and Dr. Lee Marth from CCV as guest judges, the Vermont Poet Laureate, Chard Denord, will join us and make opening remarks. And it'll be great to have Chard here to kind of speak to the students about poetry and the impact it can have on lives. In the art department, if you get the chance, this is kind of a neat project that Dave Mazer in photography and Kathleen Sweeney, they went to Land's End Farm in Chesterfield, and it's a horse farm, and they went there and they took some photos of horses, and then they did some drawings of the horses. And it sounds kind of mundane, but if you have a chance to stop by the multipurpose room, they have a show there that officially opens on Friday. If you can just take a second and walk around and look at that art, the photography is stunning. And the charcoal paintings and the other drawings are equally captivating. If you haven't ever seen the art show, this is one that is phenomenal. They really capture, both in the medium of photography and in the other visual media, they really capture the horses in movement very well. So if you get a chance, it would be great for you to see that. We just completed 2 extensive days of in-service. And one of the things I really love about our in-service practices is, we bring in some great speakers and some great people to work with our staff, but some of our best in-service comes from our own staff. And I just want to recognize Tara Cloutier and Michelle Page. They did a phenomenal presentation on using proficiency rubrics in math to the entire faculty. And the work they did there was just great. They kind of laid out the work they did this summer, and they talked about how they're using that not only to kind of document student work, but also as a motivational tool for students, that they can kind of chart their own progress as they're working through their proficiencies. And so they were great. Along those same lines, Peg Brown presented something on accommodation and modifications for all students. One of the challenges of proficiency is we need to engage students in what are called flexible pathways. And Peg did a great job of kind of demonstrating some concrete ways and giving teachers concrete tools that they could look at and say, okay, I can use this to adapt this assignment, and I can use this to help a student kind of use their own personality as they're working on something. Along those same lines, on Monday, all departments spent time working on proficiency-based practices and kept working on their rubrics and kept working on some of their assessment tools. On Tuesday, Chris Day, assistant principal, did a workshop on trauma-informed classrooms. And I know we've talked to the board a little bit about that. We have students that come from backgrounds and situations where they really have to have a consistent, stable school environment. And Chris was able to kind of talk about some of the indicators of what a trauma-based school looks like. And as we've kind of become more and more educated about this, we'll continue to work with our staff on recognizing signs of trauma in students, and also, more importantly, how do you work with those students and what do you offer them to kind of help them maximize their education and help them access their education. Kate Margaitis spent some time looking at the role of assessment. One of the things that has been challenging for us as a school is to kind of reconsider when we assess a student, it's more than just giving a grade. We're really trying to make assessment a conversation between a student and a teacher. For the student, they can identify areas where they need to improve and areas they need to work on. But for a teacher, it really is shifting into a way that they can kind of take that assessment and then plan their instruction. It used to be, and I was guilty of this as a teacher, they would do poorly on a test and you'd hand out the tests and you'd say, you really did bad on this test. Then the next day you'd start the next unit. We're finding that's not always the best thing to do for students, and really looking at helping students look at their work and kind of plan the instruction more effectively. And finally, Ben Lord, science teacher at BUHS, did an incredible session on brain-based learning. And I'm going to actually ask him to come to the board and give you a kind of a smaller version of it. He used Google Classroom to kind of teach teachers about how does the brain process information, how do we take in information, How do we move something from working memory to long-term memory? How do things fall out of long-term memory? And how do we recycle back to help students kind of retain more information? He's a wealth of information. Finally, I know last year there were concerns about students and leaving and missed class time and things of that nature. And so we begun to track student academic progress a little closer, especially among our athletes. And at the end of the fall season, we kind of took a look at our athletes in Block 4 specifically, because that's the block that's hit most of all. And we had 227 fall athletes, and of those 227, 114 scored a grade of 90 or higher in their Block 4 class. 79 scored a B or higher, B. And so that means 85% of those athletes scored really well in their Block 4 classes, either an A or a B. And looking at all of those athletes, we had a total of 12 students who had a D or an F in their Block 4 class. We kind of equate D and F as being students in need of help. Some of that, there's other extenuating circumstances, but we're going to continue to kind of look and make sure that as our students do get pulled out of the classroom, that we can kind of look at what kind of impact is that having on their academics. So,
how do those numbers compare to other blocks with similar groups of students? In other words, can we show an impact that the Block 4 class is worse than?
It's pretty much standard. It's about the same for all 4 blocks, that pass rate. It is interesting to note that among our athletes, the number of athletes that are scoring higher, they have a higher GPA than non-athletes, on average. That's not cut and dried. But we know that for students in any co-curricular that has a positive impact on their average, which, makes sense. You're more invested in the school community, you're more invested in your studies. So that's it. Thanks.
Okay, BAMS.
Boy, if you think they went for a long time, you wait until. Actually, I think they used up our allotted time. So. I actually don't have that much this evening. Just a couple of events that have taken place recently. We're split into 4 teams, and Team Taurus every year does a Thanksgiving meal. So does our Peak program, but they both did. Peak did their own meal, and then Team Taurus did what they call Torquey Day. Taurus and Turkey Day, and right before Thanksgiving break, they had a big meal, and cafe services made the turkey and stuff, and then kids made cupcakes, and they set up the multi-purpose room with a big tea, and they all sit and have a great time, and then they went outside and played a little bit, burned off some of the food. It was good weather for that, so Team Taurus did a great job. Steve discussed a little bit with in-service. We had 2 days of in-service there, the November break, and I was personally really happy with our in-service. We had, I guess I would say, 6 major things that we worked on during that time. We did a lot of not a lot. We had the second day, we did some tech training. We had 5 teachers. Steve was talking about using staff in-house to train. 5 teachers ran. We had a 45-minute session. People had a choice of one of 5 sessions, and then they had a different session of 45 minutes, and they could switch. So they could choose, of the 5, they got to choose 2 sessions. And I wanted to thank Julianne Egan, Mary Linney, Daisy Frederick, Rachel Mark from the Tarrant Institute, and Kurt Johnson, who all ran sessions. I went to a session on GoFormative, and you can Google it, it's just goformative.com, and pretty incredible software that's free for teachers. And I was thinking back to when I was a teacher, and I would make in Microsoft Word, I would just make these tests that were like multiple choice and short answer and all this stuff. Well, GoFormative now, you put those test questions in there, and then you can analyze it. You can look at the kids' results right on the screen, and they can actually write using their pads. And it's pretty incredible software, and a huge percentage of our staff are using it now because you get instant feedback to kids on their answers. You can help them, give them feedback on their questions right then. You can see their responses, and it tallies the data so you can see the data on the question. So every kid got that particular question right, or a lot of kids got it wrong. So some pretty incredible stuff. We also had a session with Joe Gruda on behavioral interventions. Joe is a new hire in the special ed department, and really fabulous job. We had youth risk behavior survey data run by Lauren Petrie, and she did a session with the staff on, especially specifically on the large gap growing in our community in demographics. Families who kind of have access to a lot of things, and the gap with the families who don't have access to a lot of things is getting wider and wider, and making it presenting more and more diversity for our school. And so we had some visuals. We actually had the staff in the gym, and she did an activity where we kind of split up, and you were kind of either on one end or the other, and you could really see the gaps growing the way they were in the activity. We spent a lot of time on our habits of work rubric. You've heard a lot about that. We're going to probably make a few tweaks to that. We had some follow-up on student-led conferences. I shared with you a little article on that, and working on our Galaxy period. So those are all big pieces of our action plan. And finally, you said finally twice, by the way, so I'm going to do it once. The intensive services program, the last 2 years they've done a circus residency. This woman named Erin O'Keefe comes and works with our intensive services program students, and there's a few high school students as well. And it's about a 2-week program where they're in our NPR, and they're learning basic kind of circus skills and a lot of embedded skills in learning all of that and training together. And then at the end, they do this little show. Their parents and friends come in, and some of the classes come down and watch, and they do a little show at the end. And for these kids, it's a pretty big accomplishment. It's a lot of risk-taking in front of their peers. They have to go in there learning how to do hula hooping and balancing and juggling and all kinds of stuff. And they get pretty excited about it, and a lot of skills. So second year doing that, Junie Pereira is kind of headed that up, along with Caroline Belcher, special educator. So that's it. Finally, any questions? Finally, any questions? All right, thanks. I said 11.
It was just
I was listening to you.
Yeah, I know. First time it doesn't go here.
Okay, so nothing else. I don't have anything from administrative report, and neither central office. There's no student council here, so we'll move on to unfinished business. And there's nothing listed under unfinished business. Is there anything under unfinished business that we need to address?
Well, we're going to talk about the budget on that, or new? That's new. Okay.
Yeah. I will say under unfinished business real quick from me is those of you that haven't gotten this yet, Steve got us our tag. We talked about that last time because we were locked out, so everybody on the board should have these now, which is great. Thank you very much for making that happen. All right, and then moving under new business, unless there's anything else, the big thing we have to do is a budget review. So, and Bob is going to lead us through the first round of budget review.
It's always tough being the last one on the program. Normally it's the first. So see what we can do. I will try to move through this rather briskly. Do we have the copies for the...
We do.
Well, I'd just like to set the stage a little bit. The Finance Committee began this process back, it seemed like shortly after school started in September. It was really October, with discussion and direction given to administrators as to how we wanted to see the budget process go in terms of comparing it to prior year and an evaluation of what's actually happening. And I think administrators that have been here for a while would say that we sound like a broken record, because it's been probably 8 or 10 years in a row now that we've asked them to present us with a budget that is basically level service and as close to level funding as possible. And every year they do that. We have to face the reality that over a period of time we do have a reduced student census, and we have to be really, really tight and considerate of the ability of our townspeople to pay taxes. So what we have done is, after that direction, each administrators met with their staffs and thoroughly put together a budget, all discretionary expenses. We have the human resource lines, which are a big part of each of these budgets, and those are all have been built based on teachers that change, positions that change, or teachers that reach a new level and so forth. So although this is not certainly the final, a lot of work has gone into this, and we're, from the expense side of it, we are pretty close to where we will be. I would just like to say that we carefully look at our student census and what we project it to be, and try to figure out how many customers we have. As a business person, that's the way I kind of look at it. How many customers do we have? And we have begun to level off in total. However, we see some variation from unit to unit, and by that I refer particularly to the new class of the new 9th graders, I believe, is the big increase, right? Because it caused BAMS to lose a little bit, and BUHS gained a little bit. So the census, BAMS, for instance, is down about to what we will be down. We project to about what we had last year, originally projected, but lower than our current number. That will reflect the 8th grade, 9th grade class, moving to 9th grade. The high school is projected to be up a little bit, and the Career Center is a little difficult to define that exactly, because you have so many part students that are there for 1 or 2 sessions and so forth. But I believe the projection will be that it'll be about level with this year. So we do not have a drastically diminishing population altogether. We've kind of leveled off. So in this format that Frank now puts together, it is part of a 62-page document that we've been working on in finance, but it condenses it down to 9 pages. And what I will do at this point is just go quickly through some key areas, and if there are questions, Frank and I or anybody else on finance that wants to have a whack at it can answer them. But I'll just go through some of the basics. And we start with the district-wide budget, and that is programs that go across more than one unit anyway, and usually all 3 units. And I would include in that nursing, the nurses, diversity program, and the big one in district-wide is plant operations and maintenance. When we get to that, you'll see that's a big number. It's a huge facility, and that's maintenance of the entire campus. So if you look, starting on page 1, the first category is regular programs, and that includes the nurses, diversity program, the library, and plant operations and maintenance. And the regular programs, the direct instructional salary is a big chunk of that, and that includes our substitute teachers, which is a pretty good sized number in there. So those are related to direct instruction, but again across all 3 schools. The second major category is support services, and those are such things as psych evaluation, student assistance program, and the nurse actually comes under there, I believe. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah.
Yep. So those are support services for students. So that's a category. And then support services for instructional staff is such things as the library and audiovisual. So those are those first three big chunks on page 1. And at the very bottom, the fourth one includes central office support, superintendent, supervisory union assessment, and that's where the expenses for the school board goes in. So that all of those four add up to general support services, and you can see at the very bottom of page 1 that that's, with all the pluses and minuses, that's just about level, 0.3% increase. And, oh, there's one more, I'm sorry, support services for business, which is a small category. That would be Joyce Manning's area. Then on page 2, just below the 2,500 or the 2,600, operations and maintenance, you can see here's where we get into some big numbers. And I want to particularly focus on in that section, again, about a third of the way down page 2, is the number 400, contract service, and that includes capital and planned maintenance. And you can see that way over on the right-hand side, we have a $224,000 increase there. That is a number that is still in play and will perhaps change. So that, when you look at the very bottom, when we get to the end, you'll find that has a big impact on our percentage of increase or lack thereof. So operation and plant maintenance, all of the janitorial service and salaries, and all the maintenance that goes along with it. And we do have quite a few outside contracted services, including snow removal. We have contracts on the HVAC system, and there's a lot that goes into that. It's a huge campus.
I'm sorry, Woody, what was the 224,000? I mean, I see the line of 400.
Well, that's under capital planned maintenance, which would fit within our actual budget as opposed to something that we would put out for, like the track we did with a bond payment or whatever. And I might point out here at this point that the Finance Committee has also reviewed with Robert Clark and Frank the capital plan that we've had in effect now for quite a few years, and we keep adding a year or two on the far end as time goes by. So we did a review of that, and there may be a little bit of movement from one year to another in a couple of items there. We elected to move up the purchase of one piece of equipment into this year's operations that was necessary. What was that thing called?
The toolkit.
The toolkit, yes. So some of those things are out there, but they tend to get moved forward or backwards a little bit. But we did a complete review of the capital plan, and depending on how things shake out, we may have to make some revisions there. But that's a pretty big part of the district-wide budget. And at the bottom of page 2, we have the big number, and that's special education. And as Frank referred, legislative changes have meant that we show a really big decrease in expense at the bottom of that by 2.7 million, but that's the fact of moving all the expenses to the supervisory union. So that number is we have to do some factoring when we get to the final bottom line to see what reality is. So special ed is on the bottom of page 2. And then there are some items for co-curricular activities, food service, and moving to the bottom, this is on page 3, the BUHS district-wide total shows a reduction of 2.4 million or 17.9%. So wouldn't that be nice if we were able to do that? Not the case, because you have to factor out the 2.7 million that's related to special education. So if you take that out of there, the balance of district-wide goes up about 295,000. However, of that, remember we said 225,000 is capital investment. So if you also factor that out, the net change in the district-wide, which is really the ongoing expenses, is about 70,000 or less than 1%. So we're in pretty good shape there, we feel. Quickly moving to page 4, the senior high. Every department there was completely analyzed by administrators in terms of staffing and also discretionary income. Discretionary spending, I wish it was discretionary income. And I will say that that's been, again, several years we've asked to try to keep discretionary spending to a level, and it certainly did happen basically in the high school. And I won't go through all the departments. The big document here, which everybody can have access to, goes each department with the staffing and what the pay increases will be and so forth. So it all builds up to these totals here. And on the senior high, I would point out that we have the direct instruction, the same types of categories and support service for students. And at the bottom of the page 5, we show a 2.1% increase overall. And there were no staff, well, there was one staff addition in the senior high, and that is reinstatement, I guess you would say, of a administrative position. As you recall, 2 years ago now?
Last year. It's, yeah, reinstatement of administrative assistant.
Right,
Not
right.
yet.
Oh, did I say that?
Not administrative.
Well, we reduced, remember we reduced from 2 assistant principals to, well, we reduced to top-level administration by 1 position. And at that time, the administrative also went away with it.
Right.
And we realized that that part of it is necessary, the administrative assistant part. So that's the only increase, or recommended increase in the high school for any staff, as I recall. Correct? Okay. So the bottom line comes down to a 2.1% increase, and really nothing else that jumps right out as a big plus or minus. It reflects salary and benefit changes in some cases. Moving on, then starting page 6 is BAMS, and basically that is a level service budget, and also staffing remains essentially the same, though I believe there's a few changes of responsibility. Is that correct, Keith? Or you would categorize it that way? There's no new staff positions.
There's no new staff positions, right? I'm not sure what you're...
Well, I mean, there was, in some cases, you may have changed responsibilities around a little, which really doesn't.
Yeah.
To, you know, reflect better ways to get things done. And BAMS is 2 pages as well. And at the bottom of page 7, you can see that that increase there is 3.7%. One thing I would just mention regarding human resources and the impact of contractual wages and so forth is that for several years we did have quite an active retirement incentive program, and there was quite a few folks who took advantage of that. But that also meant that we were bringing in new staff and at a somewhat different level, and that was a way to not have to cut our positions or our programs, but we realized some benefit there. That now we're down to the core, and so we can't look to that to gain ground, but there are always the teachers who reach new levels, new degree, or reach a different step, so that's factored in there. So the BAMS pretty much across the board, and again, there will be a slight projected decrease in census, but Dan's has been pretty solid. If you go back and look at about 5 years worth, and factor out Guilford even, they've been pretty straight. They'll just have that one little loss of a big group to, they'll go to 9th grade next year to benefit high school. Finally, right? Okay. Then we move on quickly to the Career Center. The same situation there. There's been reconfiguration, a little bit of some responsibilities. We did, after we did this budget the first time, we made a few changes. So those of you in finance that may be working off an older copy, there's a few changes in here and also at the high school and dams. I neglected to mention that, but for the rest of you, this is the first time you've seen this. So at the bottom, almost about halfway down on whatever that, page 9 is, you can see the Career Center is showing a very small increase, $6,000, 0.3%. So pretty level there. And then we look at the big bottom line, which is $25,827,768, which is a decrease of $2.155 million, which again looks pretty cool and when you look at it quickly, but you do have to factor out the special ed of 2.7 and the capital, how that might affect us, and the results are a net change of about 1.5%. I believe that's the current number, right?
That's right, yep.
Yeah. So this is a working document. There will be perhaps some few more changes. This will be presented again for your actual vote at an upcoming meeting. And I guess I would also then like to have Frank update us on the revenue and maybe touch on special ed if you think that needs to be filled in anymore.
Woody, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
On the WRCC, Frank, do you know what line item the outreach was in, the outreach program? And I think there's a $20,000 for a...
Yep, I think that's in the Perkins grant, is that right? Yes. So it is in fiscal year 18, it's a contracted service, and it's going to be part of the instructional support budget. So in Finance Committee, we looked at that group of spending. It's Perkins, if you had your detail, Mike, your detailed document, it's program 1309. But what that means is when you go to a summary document like this one, it's going to be in the instructional.
Okay.
And it would be, I'll give you the page numbers so you're on that. That's going to be in the right on page 8 there, and it's going to be part of that 300 group. And that
what group?
The 300 contracted
at
service.
The top?
The contracted service
okay.
line. Yep, which is actually down this projected year.
Okay. And if you do have the big document, it's on bottom of page 45.
Yeah, I have that one as well, but I just want to know what line item it would be in this particular document.
Yeah, so
I couldn't see a large increase in any of these categories.
Yeah, it is being sustained, right? It's an activity that's currently going, so it's a sustaining a current activity. Not new money, and in that particular case, there is a federal grant that pays for 100% of it. Any other questions? I can give you a quick review of the revenues as well, but no other questions? Regarding the revenues, so much of what drives our estimate of revenue is enrollment, and the biggest lines that we budget for are the state aid statistics, and those are also affected by a state statistics called equalized students. I'm sure you've heard that before. We don't actually have those numbers yet from the Agency of Ed. They're required to give it to us by December 15. Oftentimes they'll give us preliminary numbers by December 1st, but they have not come yet, which is unfortunate, because we were hoping that we would have those statistics, and then I could give you a little bit more insight into where this may end up in terms of a tax impact, because I know that that's always a concern and a focus for us. So at this point, all I can refer to is our fiscal year end that I had reported to you earlier was pretty favorable. And part of the reason why it was pretty favorable is because we had more tuition students than we had budgeted. So when we look ahead to next fiscal year, I think that we're going to continue to see growth in that segment of the budget, which whenever we have revenue coming from outside towns, it lowers our tax rate. It's a direct, source of funds that we don't have to raise on our tax rate. So that's a reflection of very good programs and the region recognizing that and having more students. So that's a bright spot. On a preliminary, super preliminary basis, without equalized students, what I shared with the Finance Committee is if we simply assumed we were to receive the revenues that we received in fiscal year 16, and we just said, well, let's assume no other changes. Based on this budget proposal that you've just reviewed, there still would be a fair amount of pressure on the amount that balances the budget, which is the amount to be raised by taxes. It's the what's called the General Education Spending Grant. It's in your annual report. It's the biggest line item. It's about 18 million. That number, if we assumed everything else was as presented and revenues were as they were last year, that number is up more than we'd like to see it. It's up 7%. But that's completely meaningless until we get our equalized students. If our equalized students are up, tax rates are driven by cost per student. So if we have more kids with a relatively level spending plan, that will resolve itself in terms of the funding formula. But if that's not the case, then that will give us a reason to have to revisit all our assumptions around this budget. So unfortunately, can't be. The equalized student it's based on data that our principals send on November 7th, but it's weighted for poverty and for the fact that we are a secondary institution and for the number of students that we have English language learners. Those are statistics that no administrator has access to. We have to wait for the Department of Education to follow the law, and they go into the Department of Taxes, and they get their records through state process, and they send it back to us. They're required to give it back to us by December 15th, but as I say, we don't have it at this point. So that's where we are on the revenues. And I think we covered the special ed issue pretty well. I'll just maybe give you a couple of numbers, so you understand what we're talking about in terms of magnitude. We will not budget for $365,000 in the block grant from the special education, $1.9 million in what's called intensive reimbursement, and then about $600,000 in a revenue line. It's called extraordinary reimbursement. So those line items will go to zero in this proposed budget. But as Woody's already pointed out, the assessment, you saw that down $2 million. That's what he's referring to in terms of factoring, the loss of revenue versus the reduction in spending. How is that going to come out? So those numbers will be known, I would expect, before our next draft that we review with you. A couple other major changes, potential changes that are around the horizon, short-term horizon, related to student counts is the assessment from the SU. That is based on the average daily membership and the distribution of total SU costs to the district. So we have left essentially the prior year number in there as a placeholder until we do have all of our enrollment statistics. But so a couple of the large numbers will be up for revision. The SU office does not see significant increases. However, if one district like BUHS becomes a larger proportion of the SU, even if there's no increase in spending, the district that has a larger proportion may see an increase. So you've seen that before, I'm sure. And then again, you might be on that other end of the declining enrollment, more so than the neighborhood. So you may see a reduction. Unlikely for BUHS because you're such a large part of the whole system. Maybe just a last comment, if I could. We have a meeting, I think, legislative luncheon tomorrow. Is that right, Michael? You're hosting. So a perennial topic that comes up, I hope to join that discussion. Were you going to be there, Woody?
Yes, I plan.
Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to put the Career Center in the context of the supervisor of the senior high budget, because it's been there a long time, so it's easy to just treat it as the same old, but I just wanted you to realize on page 4 we have the senior high school, so that's ourselves, paying ourselves on page 4, $2 million. This is part of the current funding mechanism across the state to fund career and technology training programs. So the issue that has been so difficult for high schools as they have been losing enrollment is that they are required to budget, as you can see, a significant amount of money across the state. So we're no different than Leland and Gray in that when we have students attend the Career Center, our own students, we have to budget for them. Even though we run the Career Center and we are the host institution. So I'm just making the point that Woody rolled this up to $25 million spending plan. Well, $2 million of that is paying ourselves. It's a mechanism that goes directly to the tax rate. It's nearly 20 cents on our tax rate. When we do our tax rate, it's about $1.70 something. 20 cents of that is this line item right here. And I'm just making the point that, as you know, state puts out thresholds. Boards always look at the thresholds. We don't want to cross the threshold. Spending per student threshold this mechanism pushes many schools right up to the brink, and then they start looking at their enrichment programs, to cut, because you can't cut that number. That number is a statutory provision that if a student wants to go to the Career Center, there's a funding mechanism that will make it happen. It's a funding formula issue that we've been trying to get changed for many years, and we'll talk about it tomorrow. And anytime anyone else can raise their concerns about it, it would be helpful. So that's where you find it in any high school budget. In this.
So you're going to lobby strongly, I hope, tomorrow?
I will. I've written a proposed legislative change. I've given that to Valerie Stewart and
such an easy fix.
Others. Well, if it was easy, it would have been fixed, but the issue is who's going to pay for it. So the mechanism now is it raises on the high school tax rate specifically for just this region. My recommendation is to address it as special ed is make it more of a statewide commitment rather than the somewhat of a roller coaster ride of who decides to go to a Career Center in any given year. If you broaden the you broaden the base, just as they have done for other programs, you will take away this inherent conflict between investing in a career center and investing in your own local programs.
I have one other question, Frank. The poverty factor that the state uses, does that increase the equalized pupil?
Yes, it does, yeah. I believe it's a factor of a 0.2 to 20%. If we report one student and that student is considered in poverty, they will send back a statistic to us that says 1.2. And when you divide 20% higher population into the same $25 million budget, it lowers your tax rate. And the idea is that we reinvest in interventions, as this administration does, that addresses the issues that go with poverty.
So if my math is correct, adding back in the special education reductions, which aren't really reductions, they're just shifting to the SU, we would have an increase of 633,317.
On the total budget you're talking about?
Total.
That sounds about right. We were saying about 640,000. And where we're doing this is if you go to the last page, page 9, you see the decrease is 2,155,000. If you add back in the 2,795,000 reduction, yes, you come up to about 640,000, and that's correct. That's what Woody had referred to as approximately a 2% increase, and then if we look at the one-time increase in capital of 225,000, that brings you down to a net operating increase of about 1%, or 416,000.
Any other questions? Thank you both very much for going through all that, spending all that time with us on it. I have one more thing under new business. I don't know if anybody else does. Anybody else have anything else under new business for our regular meeting? No, I don't see anything. Okay, the only thing I have under new business, I was in communication with Barb Nowakowski at Central Office, and it's the time of year where the report from the school board has to get written to go into the printing for the big book that comes out for our annual meeting. For the last few years, I've done this, and if somebody's really dying to do this one-page report, I know I'm selling it real big here, but if anybody really wants to do it, I'm willing to give that up. If not, I'll hang on to it, however you
I don't
guys.
think anybody could ever do quite as good a job.
I'm not sure anybody other than Barb
Well
reads
said,
it,
Woody.
but that's exciting, right?
Would be.
All right, so if everyone's good with it, I will do it again as a report from us that'll go get printed into the big book and go out, just about kind of big sweeping things that we as a board and as a school and 3 entities was doing over the past year. So.
You do such a wonderful job,
Well, thank you
Ricky.
very much.
Yeah.
All right, so is there anything else to come before the board tonight?
Our next board meeting is?
Today, I believe. It'll be on the 19th, yes?
Okay. At
Yes.
what time? Is that gonna be an early meeting?
That should be, because that would be the public,
Yeah, we usually do a public at like 6, right?
generally we have. That work for you, Frank?
Yep. So we'll do a public information session on the budget starting at 6.
And then the board will hopefully adopt the budget that night as well.
During our regular meeting.
We should have everything done by then,
Yep. Okay, so 2 weeks from tonight, we'll meet at 6 for just a budget review for the public. And we'll have all the unknown numbers hopefully will be in, and we'll have them firmed up. And then we will adopt the budget during our regular meeting, which will take place after the public review budget. Okay?
Thank you.
Excellent. Anything else before the board tonight?
If there's no other business, I move we adjourn.
Second.
Seconded by Russ. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
All right. Unless anybody wants to stay, we'll go through the whole 60-page facts.
That's really times pages to wear in thin, Bob.
All righty, thank you.
Yeah, but they returned it.
Right. Yeah, I remember when we had that meeting, we had that conversation.
Otherwise, you have to get a visitor's badge.
Wear my UMass.
There you go.
Or if there are two people, then they go, well, we need
But you never stop talking about that.